You're not half the woman your sister is. My parents said at dinner. I pushed my chair back and made one call. My name is Dana Whitfield. I'm 36 years old, and 11 days earlier, a surgeon had cut into my lower back to fix 2 herniated discs that had left me unable to stand for more than 4 minutes at a time. I was still wearing a compression brace under my dress when my mother set down her wine glass and said the sentence that ended something in me for good. You're not half the woman your sister is, Dana. Simone found a way to make something of herself. You just found a way to lie in bed and collect a paycheck. The table went quiet except for the clink of my father's fork against his plate, because he was already nodding, already agreeing, already reaching for the roll basket like this was any other Sunday. My sister Simone smiled into her champagne. She had just been named a senior VP at the family business, the company our grandfather built and that I had quietly funded back into solvency 4 years earlier with a loan nobody was supposed to know I gave. I sat there in my brace, my incisions still raw under a bandage, and I felt the old familiar pull to apologize for existing. Then I felt my phone buzz in my lap. It was a text from an attorney I had hired 6 weeks earlier, a woman named Priya Anand, and it said 3 words. Confirmed. Filing tomorrow. I looked up at my parents, at my sister, at the life they thought they still controlled, and for the first time in 36 years, I didn't feel small. I felt ready. Before I tell you what that filing was, and why by the end of that week my sister would be escorted out of a building she thought she owned, tell me what time it is where you're watching this, and what city you're in. Because what happened next didn't happen out of anger, it happened out of paperwork. And paperwork doesn't lie. I grew up the second daughter in a house where love was a currency, and Simone always got paid first. When I was 9, I broke my arm falling off my bike, and my mother's first words in the emergency room were, not, "Are you okay?" They were now, "Who's going to take Simone to her dance recital?" When I was 14, I won a regional science fair with a water filtration model I built out of gravel and sand and old soda bottles, and my father's comment at dinner was, "That's nice, but did you hear Simone made varsity?" When I was 22, fresh out of college with a business degree and a stack of student loans I paid off myself over 9 brutal years, my parents took out a small home equity loan to cover Simone's unpaid internship in New York, an internship that led nowhere. And when I asked why they never offered me that kind of help, my mother said, "You've always been the responsible one, Dana. You don't need it the way she does." That sentence became a life sentence. Responsible became a synonym for disposable. Every family gathering followed the same script. Simone would announce something, a new job, a new boyfriend, a new apartment, and my parents would beam like she'd cured a disease. If I mentioned anything about my own life, my promotion to operations director at a logistics firm, my first house, the 6-figure loan I quietly gave the family business in a moment of desperate, misguided loyalty, the room would go politely silent and then pivot back to Simone within 90 seconds. I used to time it. 90 seconds was the average window I got before the conversation returned to my sister. I surrendered every time. I paid for my parents' anniversary trip the year the business almost folded. I co-signed a car loan for Simone when her credit was too thin. I drove 4 hours each way, twice a month to help my mother after her hip replacement, while Simone sent flowers and captioned them, "Thinking of you, Mom, so proud of your strength." I told myself that's just how families work. Someone gives, someone takes, and eventually it evens out. It never evened out. It only ever tilted further. The moment I decided no more didn't happen at that dinner table. It happened 3 weeks before it, in a hospital waiting room, the night before my surgery. I called my mother to tell her I was scared. 2 herniated discs, general anesthesia, a 6-hour procedure, and I was alone because my husband was overseas for work and Simone had said she was too busy with the new promotion to come sit with me. My mother answered on the 4th ring, and in the background I could hear Simone's laugh, and my mother's voice was distracted, almost annoyed, when she said, "We're actually at a dinner for Simone's promotion right now, Dana. Can this wait until tomorrow?" I sat alone in a plastic chair in a hospital hallway the night before major surgery. listening to my mother celebrate my sister instead of asking if I was afraid. That was the moment. Not the dinner table insult. That phone call. Something in me went very quiet and very clear. I remember thinking, almost calmly, if they will not show up for me even now, I am done paying for a family that only shows up to collect. The next morning, before they wheeled me into surgery, I texted a number I had saved 8 months earlier after a friend recommended her. Priya Anand, business and family law attorney. I wrote one line. I think I need help protecting what's mine. Can we talk when I'm out of surgery? That was the beginning of the paper trail that would end everything. Recovery gave me something I hadn't had in years. Stillness. And stillness gave me clarity. Lying flat on my back for the first 10 days, unable to do much but scroll through old emails and bank statements on my laptop propped against a pillow, I started noticing things I had spent years choosing not to see. The $400,000 loan I had given the family business in a private agreement drafted by a lawyer with a signed promissory note and a 5-year repayment schedule had one payment made against it in 3 years. One, for $6,000. The rest, according to the company's public filings that I could pull because I still technically held a minority equity stake from that loan agreement, had been reclassified internally as a founder's capital contribution from my father, not a loan from me. In plain language, my parents had rewritten the history of my own money to make it look like it came from my father, erasing my stake and my repayment terms entirely. I called Priya the day I found it. She asked me to send everything. The original signed note, the wire transfer confirmations, the emails where my father had thanked me and promised repayment in writing, the company's later financial filings that no longer listed me as a creditor. She read through it over a video call 2 days later and said something I will never forget. Dana, this isn't just a family disagreement. This is a paper trail of fraud, and it's dated. Dated. That word mattered more than anything else in this entire story because dates don't have feelings. Dates don't remember things differently at Thanksgiving. Dates just sit there, unmovable, in the metadata of an email, the timestamp of a wire transfer, the file properties of a scanned document. While I healed physically, I started healing the other way too, by gathering. I requested my own bank's full transaction history for the loan, which included wire confirmations with timestamps and reference numbers. I pulled the original promissory note from my personal files, signed by both my father and mother, notarized by a notary whose stamp and license number were still verifiable through the state registry. I found 11 emails over 4 years where my father referred to it explicitly as your loan, Dana. And once, in a moment of stress after a bad quarter, we'll pay you back, I promise, just give us time. I found the company's amended internal financial statement, filed 18 months earlier, that reclassified the $400,000 as a founder contribution from Richard Whitfield, my father, erasing my name entirely from the capitalization table. I found something else too, something I almost missed. A forwarded email chain between my mother and Simone, sent to Simone's personal account, not her work one, where my mother wrote, "Don't worry about Dana finding out about the reclassification. She's too soft to ever actually push back on family. Too soft to ever actually push back on family." I read that line 4 times. Then I forwarded it to Priya with one word. Ready. Priya's advice was simple and unemotional, which was exactly what I needed. She said the goal isn't to make them feel bad. The goal is to make the facts undeniable and then let the facts do the work. So we didn't confront anyone yet. We built a formal demand letter citing the original promissory note, the unpaid balance, and the unauthorized reclassification of my equity stake, which under the terms of the original agreement required my written consent to change, consent I had never given. We built a parallel complaint to the company's outside auditor, since the family business had grown enough over the years to require external audits for their business insurance and banking relationships, flagging a material misstatement in their capitalization records. We built a timeline document, 11 pages, purely factual, purely dated, cross-referencing every wire transfer, every email, every filing, laid out like a spreadsheet of truth with no adjectives in it at all. And quietly, because the family home I had helped my parents refinance 6 years earlier was still, per the original refinance paperwork, held in a trust that named me as successor trustee due to my father's health scare that year. I confirmed with Priya that I had full legal standing to act if the trust's terms were ever violated. They had been. The trust required my sign-off for any further liens against the property. My parents had taken out a second lien 8 months earlier to fund Simone's new apartment down payment, without my knowledge or signature. Another undated signature. Another quiet forgery, this one worse, because it used a signature stamp of mine that my mother had access to from years earlier when I'd given her permission to sign minor school pickup forms for my niece. When Priya found that, her voice changed on the call. She said, "Dana, this moves from a family dispute into potential fraud and unauthorized use of a signature on a financial instrument. This is serious, and it's provable." We filed a report with the bank that had issued the second lien, flagging the unauthorized signature, along with a forensic handwriting comparison Priya had already commissioned quietly using 2 documents I had genuinely signed for comparison. We notified the trust's other named party, a cousin who worked in banking compliance and had always been fair to me, that a signature discrepancy had been identified, and formal review was underway. And we prepared the paperwork to formally revoke my mother's limited signing authority over the trust property, which the original trust document allowed me to do unilaterally as successor trustee if fraud was suspected. All of this took 6 weeks. 6 quiet weeks of healing my back, drinking too much tea, and building a case so complete that by the time I sat at that dinner table and heard "You're not half the woman your sister is," the filing my attorney texted me about wasn't a threat. It was already done. The dinner had been Simone's celebration for her promotion to Senior VP of Operations. The same operations that included overseeing vendor contracts, budget approvals, and, as it turned out, signing authority on several company accounts. 2 nights after that dinner, the company's external auditor, acting on the discrepancy flagged in our complaint, requested an emergency review of the capitalization table changes from 18 months earlier. 3 nights after that, the bank holding the second lien on my parents' home froze the disbursement pending a signature verification review because Priya's formal complaint had been received and time-stamped before the funds had fully cleared to Simone's new landlord. 5 nights after that, my cousin in banking compliance called me, not to gossip, but because as co-trustee she was formally obligated to inform me that the trust document I had requested review of showed clear evidence of an unauthorized second lien, and that the bank's own fraud department had already opened a file. None of this happened because I yelled at anyone. None of this happened in a dramatic scene at a dinner table. It happened because 3 separate institutions, an auditor, a bank, and a trust co-trustee, each independently found the same thing when they looked at the same dated documents. A $400,000 loan that had been quietly rewritten as a gift. A signature that didn't match. A lien that never should have existed. My parents called me 8 times over those 5 days. I didn't answer any of them. Priya had advised me clearly, let the professionals speak first, your voice comes last, and only once the facts are already settled. The family group chat, which had 11 people in it, aunts, uncles, my grandmother, went quiet for 2 days and then exploded. Because my aunt worked part-time doing the family business's bookkeeping and had received an internal memo about the capitalization review. She didn't know the full story. She only knew enough to ask, in the chat, in front of everyone, did anyone else know Dana's loan got turned into a gift without her signing off on it? My mother's response in that chat was 5 words. It's complicated, don't overreact. It's complicated became the second sentence I will never forget, right alongside too soft to ever actually push back. By the end of that week, the auditor's preliminary finding confirmed the capitalization table had been improperly amended without the required consent and recommended the company restate its financials to reflect my original loan terms, restoring my equity stake and reinstating the unpaid balance as an outstanding company liability. The bank's fraud department confirmed the handwriting on the second lien signature did not match my verified signature and froze the lien pending my formal statement, which Priya submitted the same week, requesting the lien be voided entirely. And the trust, under the terms I had every legal right to enforce, had my mother's signing authority formally suspended pending a full review, meaning any further changes to the property required my sign-off alone. Simone, meanwhile, found out about the auditor's review the way she found out about most consequences in her life. Someone else told her right before it became unavoidable, in this case her own company's compliance officer, who called her into a meeting to explain why the capitalization table she'd overseen approving as senior VP had a documented, unauthorized change to it. The confrontation, when it finally came, wasn't a scene. It was a scheduled call. Priya arranged a formal meeting, over video, with my parents, their attorney, the company's outside auditor's representative, and me. Simone joined because the company required her presence as the executive who had signed off on the amended capitalization filing 18 months earlier, the filing she later claimed she didn't remember approving. I sat in my home office, my back brace finally off, my incision healed into a thin, pale line, and I watched my father's face on the screen when the auditor's representative read the timeline aloud. Original loan, April, 4 years ago. Signed promissory note. Wire transfer confirmations. Amended filing, 18 months ago, reclassifying the funds without the required creditor consent. Second lien, 8 months ago, with a signature later confirmed by forensic review to not match the account holder. My father tried to speak first. He said something about family and misunderstandings and how none of us meant for it to go this far. I let him finish. Then I said 4 sentences, calm, flat, exactly as Priya and I had planned. I gave that loan in good faith. I have every document proving what was agreed. I never signed off on any of these changes. I'd like my equity and my money restored, in writing, by the date the auditor recommends. My mother started to say the thing about me being too soft, the same line from the email, but this time I already had it printed, and Priya, on the call, calmly noted for the record that this exact phrase had been in writing, in an email dated months before the dinner, referencing my mother's awareness of the reclassification well before she had claimed otherwise to the auditor. The room, virtual as it was, went silent in a way I had never once heard from my family before. Not the polite silence after I mentioned my own life at dinner. A real silence. The silence of people realizing the floor they were standing on had already been surveyed, measured, and found unstable, months before they ever felt it shift. The company's outside auditor formally restated the capitalization table within 2 weeks, restoring my original equity stake and reinstating the unpaid $400,000 as a company liability with a court-enforceable repayment schedule since Priya and I opted not to forgive any portion of it. The bank voided the second lien entirely and opened a formal fraud file against the person who had used the unauthorized signature, which by law required my written decision on whether to pursue charges. I chose not to press criminal charges against my mother, not out of forgiveness exactly, but because Priya was honest with me that it would cost me more peace than it would return, and I wanted my peace back more than I wanted anyone punished. I did, however, ensure in writing that my mother's signing authority over the trust was permanently revoked, not suspended, permanently. Simone's company, facing its own liability exposure from the improperly amended filing that she had approved as senior VP without verifying the underlying documents, placed her on administrative leave pending its own internal review. 6 weeks later, she resigned before that review concluded, which in most industries reads exactly like what it is. None of this involved me raising my voice. None of it involved a single dramatic scene where I told my family what I really thought of them. It involved documents, dates, 3 institutions, and a woman who finally stopped generating new proof of her own worth for people who had already decided, long before that dinner, what they thought of her. The house is quiet now, in a way I didn't know I was allowed to have. I changed the deed's contact information on the trust to route directly to me and Priya's office, so no future document involving that property crosses my parents' desk without my knowledge first. I keep copies of every document, the note, the emails, the auditor's final report, in both a physical folder and a cloud drive that only Priya and I can access. I still speak to my parents, occasionally, briefly, at a distance that feels less like punishment and more like the correct distance, the one I should have had years ago. Simone and I haven't spoken since the call. I don't know if we will again. I used to think that would break me. It doesn't. It turns out the version of me that needed her approval mostly existed to protect the version of her that never had to earn it. I want to be careful here because this part matters more than the paperwork. What I did wasn't revenge. Revenge would have been pressing charges against my own mother out of spite, or leaking the story to every relative just to watch her squirm, or refusing to restore the trust document properly out of anger. I didn't do any of that. I asked for exactly what was mine, in writing, through people whose job it is to be fair rather than emotional, and I stopped there. Self-respect doesn't need an audience. It doesn't need anyone else to lose everything. It just needs the truth to be documented, and then it needs you to stop apologizing for asking for it. So here's my question for you, the one I keep sitting with in this quiet house. Where is the line, in your own life, between keeping the peace and quietly funding your own disappearance? And once you find that line, what's the first document, the first boundary, the first quiet no, that you'd need to draw it? Thank you for watching this story all the way through. If it meant something to you, if any part of it felt familiar, hit like, subscribe for more stories like this one, and tell me in the comments what you would have done differently, or the same. This story is a work of fiction. Any resemblance to real people, families, or events is coincidental, and all names, companies, and details have been created for storytelling purposes only.